Information Technology Leaders is sponsored by Hitachi Consulting, Hitachi's global business and IT consulting company. Hitachi Consulting offers practical solutions to generate demand, ensure supply, and help you manage your enterprise effectively. More information is available at www.hitachiconsulting.com. This week on Information Technology Leaders, Tamra Chandler, Vice President of Hitachi Consulting. Now here's your host, Laura Schildkraut.
Today's guest is the Vice President in charge of Hitachi Consulting's Pacific Northwest practice. She didn't think she'd end up in business, but engineering, in which she attained her undergraduate degree, was never her passion. After several jobs with different companies and earning an MBA from the University of Washington, she found a professional home she loved with ArthurAnderson. During her 8 years there, she honed her skills at problem solving, brainstorming, management and leadership, and further cemented her ethical compass. That was before Enron. No one inside ArthurAnderson expected the effects of the Enron debacle to ripple through the firm, let alone take it down. But that's exactly what happened. After the Enron indictment, she had several appealing offers. She declined them all, holding out for a company that would welcome her, her fellow local partners, and the staff they built so carefully. I don't think she could have slept at night any other way. Please welcome Tamra Chandler. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Montana, in the northwest corner of Montana.
What was that like?
In several respects, it was wonderful because of the nature and outdoors and the skiing and the things you got to do. In other respects, it was very limiting on what your options were as a kid. I think when I went to college, it was kind of a whole new world opened up because things I hadn't been exposed to.
Yeah.
And I was very lucky because I traveled a lot with my mother and my father and got exposed to a lot of things through that. But there's still, when you're in a small community like that.
It feels small and you don't realize it feels small.
Right.
What were you like in high school?
In junior high, I was pretty wild, my mom would probably tell you. But I grew out of that, and by high school, I was sort of, I was pretty boring. I actually worked half of the time, and my school had flexibility. If you had enough credits to graduate, you didn't have to be on campus the whole time, so I went to school.
Wow.
My last few high school years, like half days, and I worked in the afternoons. I was a lifeguard and had gotten, advanced first aid certifications, and I was just busy doing other things.
When did you first know you were smart?
Oh, gosh. I got good grades a lot, but there was things that happened to me in my youth that really questioned, at times, my intelligence. Not just the stupid things you do, but, when I was a kid, they still put you in different levels of classes, like in grade school. And I remember I was always kind of in the medium class, which seemed pretty comfortable. And then they moved me up to the smart class. Except for reading, they would strip me out and stick me like with the low class, for reading. And so you always had these mixed messages. It's like, are you smart? Are you not smart?
And they tell you, oh, it's fine, but you know
it's
not.
All
it's
the kids knew,
Yeah.
and you stereotyped based on which class kids were in. And thankfully, I don't think they do that anymore.
No, not as much.
Yeah.
Not to give away your age, but this was in the early 80s. What did you watch your parents experience professionally that started to impact the direction you decided to pursue?
Well, my parents were both, I think they're both entrepreneurs, and they both were in businesses that were very dependent on the economy and would cycle with the economy. And in the late 70s and early 80s, the economy wasn't great, and it particularly wasn't great in Montana. My mother owned a clothing store. My father was in construction. And I would just see them really struggle with the economy and really work at times to make ends. There was glory days, and then there were the really thin days. And I think I went into university with this thought of, I need to find something that's stable, because I saw the stress that created, and I didn't want to undergo that same stress.
Where did you go to college?
I went to Montana State University for my undergrad in Bozeman, which was 6-hour drive from my hometown. I looked at some other colleges, but one, frankly, couldn't afford them, and two, the Montana State's engineering program is very strong, so I selected that.
So was engineering just an interest because of the perceived stability, or was there something else?
It was the stability. I had always done very well in math and science in high school, and had sat down with a couple of my science teachers and said, what should I be, what should I do? And one of them said, well, I should go into engineering. And I said, what's that?
Right.
And
Yeah.
he kind of explained it to me. And then, of course, you have to pick a discipline in engineering. And he said, well, which one are you going to pick? And we'd done a chapter on electricity and physics. That seemed cool. So, that was about the depth of
Right.
my knowledge. I sort of went after it as an undergrad and picked electrical engineering.
Was college significantly more difficult for you than high school was?
College was a shock because I hadn't studied at all, really, in high school. Like I said, I worked a lot. I did a lot of other things. And I'd always managed to get by without a lot of work. I got to my first quarter and suddenly found out that the bar had been raised. And it took me a while to figure that out. And not only was it my engineering courses that were difficult to start out with, but then also I had signed up for a 300-level philosophy class by this old hippie philosopher who was, I'm sure, brilliant, but completely over my head as an incoming student. And so it was a bit of a shock. I kind of realized that I needed to work a lot harder. I had to learn how to study. I had to kind of back up. I remember calling my dad and just being so disappointed in myself because I wasn't doing very well. And he kind of said, I love you no matter what you do, and I know you can do it. And I kind of got myself together, and things went better after that.
Yeah, it's kind of a hard thing to face and then regroup from.
Right.
How long did it take you to realize that engineering just wasn't really your passion?
Well, even when I was in school, I didn't really much like it, but I sort of got very stubborn about it, which is probably, people could tell you at times, is one of my weaknesses, can be very stubborn. A lot of people thought that a woman couldn't be an engineer, particularly an electrical engineer. And I was a bit of an oddball because I was in the dance company and I hung out with a lot of musicians and I had pink hair and, I didn't look like your standard electrical engineering student. And so because of sort of that pushback you got, I got very stubborn about staying in it. If I was to do it again, I probably would have been an industrial engineer. I really liked that a lot better. It was more in the business side of it. It fit better for me. But electrical, there was a lot happening at that point. That was just before computers. I mean, talk about dating myself.
Right.
The first time I used a PC was to write my graduation announcement coming out of my undergraduate program. We had done Z80 and we had big VAX systems and stuff and all that. But we didn't have the laptops and all.
So do you think that part of the reason you ended up staying in electrical engineering was because you thought if you left, instead of just saying, I'm not interested, it would be like proving them that they were right?
Yeah, there was certainly some of that.
Yeah.
It's like I had to prove to everyone I could get that degree. But and there was good jobs in it, in that field. So those were the two reasons I think I stuck with it.
Yeah. When it came time to graduate, how did you approach searching for a job?
I wanted to live in Seattle. That was my #1 criteria.
Why?
My mother and I used to come to Seattle for market when she had her clothing store, and there was something about this city that always just captured me.
It's
I've
magic,
loved this
isn't it?
city.
Yeah.
It is. You walk down by the waterfront and the smell and the seagull. I don't know. I still love it. So, I had several offers, but the one was with Boeing in Seattle, and that was one I took.
What were your initial roles and responsibilities?
I went in there as a reliability engineer in the 747, 767 program, which was a bit funny because I hadn't actually studied statistics in class, and that was a lot of what the job was. We looked at the reliability of certain parts and the failure of parts and supporting different warranty programs and that. So I worked there.
Yeah. What surprised you about that first full-time work experience?
Boeing's an interesting place. There's not a lot surprising about Boeing. And back in the day, that was, when they had the rows of seats and you'd all sit in a row and you'd face the boss's door and the two guys in front of me smoked cigars and a pipe. I mean, it's just funny to think. It wasn't that long ago, but there was, you talk about mentoring, there was an engineer there that really took me under his wing and taught me a lot about the field that I didn't know a lot about and kind of helped guide me and coach me about what are the things that he thought I was good at and directions to go.
Yeah. In 2 years, you moved to another job within Boeing. Why the move, and what area did you move into?
I felt in some respects like I wanted to try some real engineering, and so I moved over to a group that was called Propulsion Electronics. It was part of the 757 program. But at the time, Boeing wasn't really building any airplanes. We were clearly just maintaining, right? So I went over hoping to get a little experience to find out, do I have a passion for engineering? And I ended up doing kind of the same job, but from you know, a different point of view, and working with my old group to help them understand what parts did we need to spend some time on, or do some redesign efforts and that, but not as much engineering as I would have liked.
You said that Boeing was a great place to start a career. Why were you so ready to leave?
Boeing, I think, was a great place because the training was phenomenal. I mean, as I mentioned, PCs had just come out. I got all my base PC training at Boeing. You learn how to operate in a big organization, and the politics and how that works and how things get done, and all those key learnings that when you come out of school you really don't have a clue. And so that was really good. The challenge for me was I was bored a lot of the time. The work wasn't challenging enough. It didn't move at a fast enough pace, and I really felt I needed something bigger, something more to do.
Why did you decide to further your education at this point?
Even when I was at Boeing, I'd always watch the boss's doors, and I'd always be wondering, what's going on in there? You know, what could I do? And I'd always be thinking sort of strategically around the business and how could I help? And that always seemed to be where my interest was. So I really wanted to go back to school. I also think, you know, as I said with engineering, it was sort of like I had to get through it. I kind of wanted to go back to school to really learn and to sort of immerse myself in that, because I actually love learning, but, you know, my undergrad was just, you know, killing yourself just trying to get through.
Right. Well, when you started the program, you made a promise to yourself. How long did that promise last?
I promised myself it wasn't going to work. As I mentioned, I worked through high school. I think I've worked since I was 11 years old doing different jobs. And I made it a quarter without working. Yeah. And I ended up taking an internship at IBM because it was posted on the wall down in the MBA lounge, and I went for it, and it seemed like it would be interesting because that was an organization I knew nothing about, and I thought I'd like to kind of explore what it was like. You heard a lot about IBM, right? Yeah. So I took that on, and then that didn't last very long before my dad and I actually decided to launch our own business. And I would go to school the Monday through Thursday, and on Friday I would do the books for Chandler Construction, which was the business that he and I started together, and was technically in my name. I was the sole proprietor, because my father said, if you go do the paperwork, he doesn't like paperwork, if you go do the paperwork, you know, I'll go build the houses. And so that's how it turned out.
Is it still in your name?
It's not in business anymore. He went another path and I went another path, but it stayed in my name for several years, yes.
Yeah. In terms of the MBA program overall, what did you contribute to it and what did you get out of it?
What did I contribute to it? Well, I was the president of Graduate of Women in Management, and I think we did fundraising that year. I was talking to them, and they still have a big bucket of money. I thought I'd probably raise some of that money for you guys. I got a ton from the program. Like I said, I think it was a chance for me to really learn, and in areas I hadn't studied much before, whether that was in ethics or statistics. You know, I finally took a real statistics class, or whatever. I got a ton from the program. I enjoyed it immensely.
Tell us about United Research and how they found you.
I was in my second year and thought I wasn't going to actually apply for any jobs. I thought I would wait and either go back to Chandler Construction and try to build that into something bigger with my father, or do something else. I think I have that entrepreneurial spirit that comes in my family. And I got this letter out of the blue from United Research saying, we're interested in you, come talk to us. And I tend to be a person that believes a little bit in fate. If things happen, I kind of think, well, that's an interesting thing. I'm going to follow that to see where it takes me. And so I said, okay, I'll talk to you. And I went to a first round interview, which was an interesting interview. It was kind of one of those psychological interviews, you know, do you like your father? Or, kind of, you wonder if you fail at like what that meant.
Or what kind of job is this?
Yeah, exactly. So I got through that first round, and then the second round they had was you went to a hotel and with a whole bunch of other candidates, and they put you through all these exercises, and a bunch of them stood around and watched you. And then if you passed that, you went back to Morristown, New Jersey. And I just kept going through this process because it was getting more interesting, as we were going through. And you had to prepare a business case and stand up in front of their executive team and present a business case to them. And they only hired MBAs, they didn't hire undergrads. Most of United Research was very experienced people that they had hired from around the world. And most people have never heard of them. At the time, they were working probably with some of the top Fortune 50 companies doing what they called change management consulting, what later became known as reengineering once the book was written. But yeah, so I ended up there. And shortly after arriving there, it was purchased by Capgemini Sogeti of France and became Gemini Consulting.
What changes started happening within the company?
Gemini, when I joined, it was 200 people, something like that. And they started growing rapidly. They were having a lot of success with, like I mentioned, the Fortune 50. And unfortunately, my feeling, I mean, everyone's going to have a different opinion on it, is that the VP ego factor got a little bit out of control. And they started selling bigger and bigger projects, but not always the best projects for the company. And I think it was kind of each of the VPs were trying to outdo each other a little bit. And it was a little bit of the culture of the organization. And the VP I worked for had been a fighter pilot in Vietnam, and he kind of had that personality that he brought to work. And I learned an immense amount, but the culture started to get a little bit crazy as as they were trying to sell these gigantic $10 million re-engineering projects. I mean, you think about that, $10 million project, and there was no systems work. This is purely just people and process. Yeah, they were huge.
Yeah. You'd been working for the company for about 2 years, and then things finally came to a head when you were working on a project in Virginia. What happened?
I had been assigned on a project. It was actually for Philip Morris, and I wasn't working actually direct for the client. I was doing some work to build a methodology that we were going to be applying at the client. And I was working for a vice president who liked the way I thought, and unfortunately he started to like more about me than the way I thought. And I actually started to have a lot of problems with him around sexual harassment. Not anything frightening, but just overt advances that were really uncalled for. And that was bad. I kind of finally escaped there and got on another project that was actually a really good project. But then shortly after that, I ended up back on another project where he was involved, and that was kind of the final straw for me and Gemini.
You decided to leave the company. As you look back on it, did you handle that situation as well as you could have?
You know, I think I was a little bit of a chicken. I didn't come right at it. When I was at Philip Morris, I easily, thinking back now, I probably should have raised the flag then and asked for help and tried to shut him down at the time. Instead, I kind of used the I'm going to escape plan and distance myself from him, which worked for a time. After I left, I actually wrote a letter because I had kept notes, which was my father's counsel. Why don't you just keep track of everything that's going on? So I'd kept pretty specific notes about the things that he was up to, and I submitted a letter to Gemini. And I clearly said, my point was I didn't want anything from them. All I wanted was him not to do that to somebody else. And I thought they handled it very well. They flew out, they talked to me, they kind of got my story, they promised me they'd take care of it, and I heard later, through the grapevine essentially, that they did.
Yeah. So I wonder if it all would have been different had you really wanted to stay.
I think so. I think I probably would have been a little more aggressive about handling the situation, but I had decided to leave. I had been traveling 100% of the time for 2 years. Jeff, my husband, and I were driving around Seattle one Sunday, and there was this whole new building, and I said, where did that building come from? And he said, oh, it's been there for a while, and it was kind of a wake-up call. It's like, I love my community, I love to be here, I want to be back in it. And so at that point, it was easier to kind of come back home, step away.
So you came back and worked for your dad's company. How had it changed in 2 years?
Gosh, not very much. I kind of fell back into the same. I mean, we were busy. We were bigger. He had more going on, so it was more of a full-time job. I mean, it was a pretty significant job to try to keep track of everything that was going on from an office side and the billing. And we had hired another project manager, so we had more projects going on. So it was largely the same, just kind of turned up a few volumes.
You'd said that you were lazily looking for work. Why not look more aggressively?
Because I'm lazy.
I don't buy that.
Actually, my husband and I were getting married, and we got married that summer, and so I really didn't want to work very much until after we had gotten married, and we had planned a 5-week honeymoon trip, so that was in the cards. And so I was sort of, I was not too lazy. I had hooked up with some friends of my uncle, actually. My uncle used to be in the House of Representatives. He knew lots of people locally, and he had connected me with Woody Howes, who used to be one of the founding members of Cable and Howes, which was a investment company locally, one of the earlier ones in Seattle. And so I had met with Woody, and he had given me leads on lots of different, because I was looking for something more entrepreneurial, kind of a startup type of a company that was looking for someone who needed to solve problems and was flexible and could move around. So I'd talked to a lot of his companies, and it was a really kind of interesting process to go through. Unfortunately, nothing really worked out, but and then I got a call out of the blue from Microsoft, so I went out and interviewed out there.
Yeah. What did you like about the job and the corporate culture initially?
At Microsoft?
Yeah.
Microsoft was a tough year for me, honestly. I stepped into that role with some question about whether I wanted to be there in the first place. And I kind of got thrown into the fire. I mean, I was there the first couple of days, and they said, oh, by the way, you have to go do this training in Hawaii and then in Europe for our products. And these are products I didn't know at all. And I said, I'm supposed to be training people on products I don't know. How do I learn? They're like, I don't know, go figure it out. You know, so it was kind of thrown into the fire. That situation, what it did present me that I've valued highly is some relationships, because I really got to know some key people in the organization that kind of helped me through that process. My friend Susie and I and her husband Martin sat in their kitchen till 4 in the morning creating some of the decks that we used during the training, which turned out to go okay, but was kind of a challenge at the time.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Exactly, exactly.
So you lasted a year.
I lasted exactly a year.
And how did Arthur Anderson cross your radar screen?
Brian McMullen, who had also been at Gemini, and I think we shared the passion for consulting. And when he was in the process of leaving Gemini, and he and I got to talking about what's going on out in the market. And he had heard about Arthur Anderson's business consulting practice, and that they were trying to start to build it here in the Seattle market, and suggested, I call the guy he had been talking to. So I called the head of that practice at that point and went in and talked to him.
Tell us about your first project there, the Darigold project.
I came in as a manager into Andersen, which at the time meant nothing to me because I hadn't really grown up in that Big Five environment. But so just sort of thrown into the fire again a little bit.
But now you knew what to do. You
knew
how to handle that a little bit.
But since everyone always said, oh, Arthur Anderson, but the business consulting practice was brand new. And Andersen Consulting at that time didn't want to share any of their intellectual capital with us. So we had very little to go on. So the first project, Darigold, was a really fun project because it was back in my roots of doing process reengineering work. We call it the Perfect Order, the POP project. And it was all about helping them streamline their supply chain and take costs out of their systems. And I spent a summer in the basement of their factory helping map out routes because we didn't have trucking software and those types. It was really a fun project. But because we didn't have a lot of this intellectual capital, it was a crazy project. And the night before the meeting with the executives, you'd be creating the intellectual capital that you would be presenting to them the next day. So it was an interesting project as far as trying to stay ahead of the game and get everything built. But a lot of our foundation and our methodologies and all of that kind of became our standard in the Northwest really came out of that first project.
And how did this position start to shake you out of your comfort zone?
I think that I did get really out of my comfort zone until I hit the LDEC project, which was the first ERP project I'd ever been involved with. And I'd actually, between Darigold and LDEC, had a child and had taken 4 months off. And my partner called me up and said, we have this project, it's an Oracle. I actually got involved a little bit in the sales effort, but we want you to go up and run this project. And I said, great, kind of what's Oracle? I was pretty ignorant at the point. I mean, obviously I knew what Oracle was, but I hadn't ever been trained in it or anything. So I was a bit out of my comfort zone and being thrown into the lead of a project that I didn't know a lot about, a very significant dimension of the project.
And also sort of right after you'd been out of it for...
Yeah, I was probably still out of it the first 6 months. You know, you're just coming back, you're not sleeping very much, you're trying to get yourself grounded, your hormones are... I was still breastfeeding, you know, so you've got all that stuff going on, and you're trying to figure out this project and how it all fits together. But we have we had a strong team. I had people on the team that understood the technology very well, and we kind of matched that with our tried and true methodologies, and it actually, I think, probably turned out to be one of the best projects I've ever run. But yeah, you start out, my friend Steve Moffat and I say in consulting, every project you start out, you kind of stand on the edge of a cliff and you sort of jump and you think, I hope that cord holds, you know? And I think that's what people like about consulting is you get a bit of that thrill. It's like, is this the time you're not going to pull it off? Is this the time you're not going to, make it happen? And then
fun?
you do. And that's fun.
Yeah.
But I think, if you're thinking of consulting as a career, you have to decide is that fun for you?
Tell us about some of the critical events that led up to the Consumer Products Retreat.
Well, that's an interesting story. The practice that I've been brought into was under one partner here in Seattle. And he had really built the Seattle practice to about 100 people, but had never promoted anybody above senior manager. He was the only partner, and then we had this whole very large pyramid underneath him. And in many ways, he's a brilliant man. Huge ego to go along with his brilliance, but a brilliant man. And we had gone through a reorganization, and he didn't like the answer that our leadership had come up with about how the organization was going to be reorganized, because he was going to report to someone in LA who he had actually fled LA because there had been some tension between them. So he called an all-hands meeting in a hotel in South Center and demanded everybody be there, mandatory meeting. You show up into one of those typical rooms, and the hotel was in the DoubleTree, and over the PA is playing this theme from the Titanic. And we're all standing there thinking, what are we doing here, and why is that music playing?
Somebody get that off the PA.
I mean, the fact is, many of us had a pretty good inkling as to why we were there. But the partner that I was working for made us all wait about 15 minutes later than he said he was going to be there. And then he came in with a completely rehearsed speech with a video camera in the room, with the whole thing going, and proceeded to announce that he was leaving. And not only was he leaving, but he was predicting the demise of the business consulting practice, that they hadn't heeded his advice, and he used this whole Humpty Dumpty analogy. You're never going to be able to put it all back together again, and very dramatic. And he's a very charismatic leader, so everyone was pretty pulled into this. Oh my word, the sky is falling. Well, of course, it would have happened that I, at the time, was running this consumer products practice, which was probably about half of the group. And we had a retreat planned essentially the next day. And I really kind of said, gosh, do we cancel the retreat? Is it all over? And made the decision that no, we weren't going to cancel the retreat. We were still going to pull people together. And it worked out fabulously, because the whole agenda was really to get all of our people up talking about what they were doing at clients, talking about the work that they were doing, talking about the things that they had created. And it was an incredibly healing experience, because by the end of the day, we said, gosh, we loved that partner, but he didn't do any of this. We did all of this, and we can continue to do that without his leadership. And it was a kind of an aha, I think, for all of us, and we were able to sort of move on.
From there. And moving on for you meant that you were promoted to partner.
Yeah, I was promoted to partner, and shortly after that was really asked to fill his shoes as the leader of the Pacific Northwest practice.
And were you ready for that level of leadership?
No, not at all. I mean, I kind of went from, am I going to be promoted partner, to, yes, you're promoted partner, and yes, you're running the practice. And, I hadn't had a lot of coaching besides watching other people do it around how do you do that. And I hadn't been in that strong of a leadership role for that long, even at Andersen. So, there's things that I certainly learned through the process, and I think I wasn't as strong early on as I grew into it. One of the senior managers I had that worked with me we did a project for Alberto, and he worked down there, and I'll always remember this. We were driving back to the city, and he just started talking to me about, this is what you need to do. And I realized by the time we got to the city, he'd just completely given me this whole mentoring, coaching speech that I hadn't really been prepared for, but that I very much needed.
Is he the one who said people are waiting for you to step up and lead?
He did.
Yeah.
He just kind of said, quit, worrying about it and step out there and lead. Yeah.
Follow your instincts.
Right.
Yeah. What was happening in the industry during this time? Just right about .com.
Well, yeah, we just started to fall into the whole .com thing. I mean, it's interesting. It seems like my career has been like one challenge. Maybe that's what everybody's career is like, but it always seems like there's this big event. And the big event that happened then was really the .com boom. And on one hand, it was wonderful because we had a huge amount of work suddenly knocking at the door. On the other hand, it was very difficult to keep people because everyone thought they were going to leave and go start a .com and get rich. And I had, senior consultants telling me they were going to go run companies, and it was a crazy time. And the retention was hard. And I think what made it the hardest was we started to lose senior level people and people that had really been my peers, my confidants, my go-to people as we had, grown in our careers. And that was really devastating.
Why did you decide to stay?
I was pregnant again, and I had a couple of the guys, like I said, that were very close to me were saying, "Oh, you should leave, Tamra. There's millions to be made, and you're wasting yourself here, and this and that." And I was 8 months pregnant. I was like, "Well, I think I'll just hang for a while."
Hard to interview like that.
Yeah, hard to interview like that, and you're not thinking clearly anyway. You've got so many things on your mind. So I said, well, I think I'm going to hang, and take the time off, and then figure out from there where I go. So that's kind of what I did.
Yeah. How did your maternity leave differ from the last one?
I completely checked out on this maternity leave, which I think was really what I needed to do. When I'd been pregnant with Ivy and when I was home with Ivy, I actually came to several meetings with her. She would come in her little car seat, and I would attend meetings. I stayed very connected. When I had Wilson, and we'd just gone through all this .com stuff, I told the other partners at the firm, I said, I'll see you in 4 months. And that's pretty much what I did. We traveled to Europe. We had a great time. And I think it was extremely rejuvenating for me. It helped me realize, no, this is what I want to do. I still believe in our practice. It's where I want to be. And I came back, very charged up around getting some of the people back we had lost and putting some new energy into the practice.
So during this time, there were also a lot of reorgs. How did you manage your staff through them, and how did you fare?
Well, there was reorgs happening at the global level that I didn't even know about because I was so checked out. Wadia, who ran ArthurAnderson, had resigned while I was gone, and all sorts of things had happened. On the other reorgs, I stayed connected with once I got back, I kind of hooked up with the people who I knew were kind of going to be the leaders going forward. Michael Travis, who I worked for at the time, who is now the CEO of our company, called me. This is sort of funny story, so I'll tell you as I was coming back, and he was asking me, "Oh, well, so and so resigned. This happened." And I was like, "No," and I was thinking he's going to think I'm the biggest jerk ever. I don't know anything that's going on. But he said, "Well, I think you need to get caught up on this, and we want to launch the new year. And will you come down to California and attend kind of the meeting?" Because our fiscal year started the same day I was going to start back to work after having my son. So I said, "Well, I'll come, but my son's coming with me because I can't leave him yet. Right. He's only 4 months old." And Michael was good enough to say, "Okay, great." And so I flew down to California with, Wilson strapped to my chest, and went to the meeting. And there was a lot of new partners there because people I hadn't met before and that. But actually having Wilson there turned out to be a great coup because they would come and talk to me, and I heard the head of our West region was telling me stories about, his kids in the bouncy seats, and it really kind of opened the doors to some of those.
It's very warming.
Yeah, it was.
In a way.
It was great.
Yeah, the barriers break down, and people just become people.
Yeah,
in a way with that. What was the difference between being a national partner and being an equity partner?
When you were a national partner with Andersen, you were essentially still paid a salary. So you had kind of a set compensation package that had a piece of variability based on how much profitability you had. You got a bonus that was kind of scaled based on how well the firm did that year. When you became an equity partner, you truly bought into the firm. It's like buying shares. You bought your units. And then you were paid in a much more of a roller coaster manner based on how well the firm was doing. And you truly, at the end of the year, got reconciled based on how much money we made and what proportion of that is distributed to the partners based on how many units you had. So you were an owner. You were no longer paid, you know, health care and all that stuff. You essentially paid 100% of your own because you were an owner of the company.
Owner of the company. When did you sign your equity partner agreement?
I signed my equity agreement in November of 2001.
And when did the Enron story break?
About December of 2001.
Yeah.
So signing my equity partner agreement included signing a note for $250,000 that you say you will pay into the firm to buy into your equity shares.
Right.
And historically, that had been a very good bargain. You know, you bought your equity and it paid back well if you stayed another 10 or 15 years.
Not so much.
Not so much.
No.
No. And the little frightening thing was that they sold our notes almost immediately after signing them to Citibank. So you weren't even on the hook anymore to ArthurAnderson.
Right.
You were
You're
now
on
on the hook to
somebody
Citibank.
else. Yeah. So they were going to see that. So what happened next?
Gosh, that whole, can I back up and tell
Sure.
a little bit?
Absolutely.
To me, the whole story sort of starts in October, which was the last worldwide partners meeting we had at Andersen. And it was in New Orleans. And it was not far after 9/11, so it was poorly populated or attended based on what it normally would be. But my husband and I had flown to New Orleans to attend the meeting. It was a fabulous, I mean, we had Cirque du Soleil, you know, perform, and you know, it was a big event. You had partners from all over the world come in. On the final day of the meeting, Berardino, who ran Andersen at the time, was doing a Q&A, kind of wrapping up, you know, the couple of days that we had met. And I always remember that one of the questions he got was, should we restructure or should we do something with the audit practice to protect ourselves from litigation concerns? And Berardino was kind of an old, you know, very Northeast New Yorker kind of guy. We'd always joke a little mafia sort of way he would talk, but very, very down-to-earth man. But the most passion I'd ever seen kind of come out of him was with this question. And he kind of said, hey, you work for an audit firm. If you don't want to work for an audit firm, you know, there's the door. And I mean, I was kind of blown. I was like, whoa, these pretty strong words. I think he probably wakes up with, you know, nightmares now thinking about that response to that question, because it was a very insightful question. At the time, I had no idea how insightful that question was.
Right.
So, you know, that's October. I sign my papers in November. The story starts to break in December. You know, by the beginning of the year, you're getting more and more press. I mean, Andersen is all over the press. All the stories that are coming out internally in our organization are, you know, don't worry, be calm. This has happened before. We didn't do anything wrong, which I still think we really didn't do anything wrong. But if I do a lot of change management consulting, and if you follow the path we went through, it was clearly a change management path. You know, we kind of started with an uninformed optimism and went through denial, and then pretty soon we were in anger, and you know, we had to go through the whole process as it became more and more apparent that our firm was at risk. And the way we were structured in North America, we were all one entity, so you couldn't separate consulting from tax from audit. We were one unit of partners. And we all faced the same liability concerns. We were all in it together. So early in say February or so, it started to become a little scarier, and I pulled together the partners from the business consulting practice in the Northwest and started to do planning and just started to say, you know, what are the scenarios? What are the alternatives? Where do we go from here? You know, the little meeting that happened in my living room around planning was happening all over the world. And that really grew into efforts that were at the national level, at the regional level, at the local level. I mean, we were looking at, 700 ways to slice up the company and figure out how to save it. It was interesting. An interesting process I hope I never go through it again.
Yeah. And then how did the connection with Experio end up coming about?
Our national business consulting practice had struck a deal essentially with what was then KPMG Consulting, which is now Bearing Point. And I'd participated in that national team that had selected the KPMG choice. We had signed a letter of intent with them. If anybody's gone through a merger, you kind of go through a process. You sign a letter of intent. You kind of are in a cone of silence at that time. Prior to signing the deal with KPMG, we had done a lot of exploration locally around what were some options for us, either as a West region or just as a Pacific Northwest practice. We'd even looked at, trying to get funding and going out on our own. But we got put into this cone of silence with KPMG. We had to sit quietly and kind of tell our people that was where we were going, because that's all we knew at the time. The partners were on a call every Monday from Gail Sainel, who ran our practice, telling us what was going on. And we had gone through one round of layoffs and had been promised that, okay, that was it. Everybody else who was still there was going to go into whatever deal we did. And we were kind of moving down that path. Well, the letter of intent expired. And immediately we started talking again to other organizations, because, I mean, honestly, I just didn't feel good about where we were going. I mean, you talk about learning, your instincts were just, I wasn't there. So we started talking to more people. We'd actually put a deal together with a company called SBI. And then there was sort of this moment of truth when Gail had one of these all-partner calls on a Monday night, and she said in that call, well, we're going to do the deal with KPMG, but we're not taking everybody with us. And all of us had spent the last several months telling our people,
Right.
everybody's going, you've got a home. So I had been calling, the West region leaders throughout this whole process, trying to get them to go a different direction. And I knew them well enough to know that they're very honorable people and that they would have a hard time with that. So I called up Michael Travis and I said, what do you think now? And he said, that's it. That's the final straw. That was Monday. He happened to be here that night. He and I flew to Dallas on Tuesday. We met with Experio, and by the end of that week, we had a deal put together with Experio to take majority of the West region into Experio.
Yeah. Was it hard to convince the staff people to go?
Well, it was, total shock for them, because we had been going down this path and we didn't have anything else to tell them. Although we wanted to tell them something else, but we didn't have anything else to tell them. And then all of a sudden, they get this call from me and Carl Kruger and other of us saying,
guess what?
Guess what? We're going a different direction. We want you all to come with us. And I'm sorry you don't have much time to decide. And that's kind of how it played out. They had very little time to figure out where they wanted to go. There were some people that still wanted to go into KPMG, so we were trying to sort out who got offers, because we were trying to make sure that everybody got one offer, and there was kind of a limited number, so we're trying to make sure people didn't get two offers, and it was kind of crazy time, but we got through it.
Yeah. Then after about a year or so there, the name changed to Hitachi Consulting.
Right.
Did you agree with the decision behind that name change?
I not only agreed with it, it was the name that I had requested when we were looking for a new name, because I think a lot of the other names we looked at, global services, this and that, I just think they get confusing. I was like, say what we do. We're a consultant. We're Hitachi and we do consulting. And the amazing thing is, with 1,200 companies under the Hitachi umbrella, not one of them was named Hitachi Consulting. So it worked out.
What are the odds of that?
Yeah, I know. It worked out very well, because there's many consulting companies within that umbrella.
And what are the scope of your projects? Do you compete directly with the other consultancies that we would know more commonly, Capgemini, Accenture?
Yes, absolutely.
Deloitte?
We compete head-to-head with, I guess, what I would call the larger consultancies. I think the thing that we can do is we offer a little bit more flexibility, smaller teams, more configured to the needs of the clients. We win a lot of work because of that.
What are the advantages and what are the challenges to having Hitachi as a parent?
We always joke we get better seating now that we have that name in a restaurant. Hitachi, we better put you in a good spot. The advantages to having them as a parent are clearly a lot of the synergies that we're trying to work through. We are working to do more work for Japanese companies in America, and then hoping to take that into American companies in Japan and really build a core center of excellence in that field. And Hitachi has a lot of companies in the U.S. that we are currently working for. But there's, you start going through it, Sony, and, you start listing all of them. There's a lot of them here in the U.S. that we really think we can work well with them and kind of that blend of cultures. We're also really looking at how to take advantage of a lot of the Hitachi technologies, which are numerous and can't possibly keep up with all of them. But they're a very strong player in the healthcare industry. They've created an ERP solution for biotechs that we're looking at trying to bring and localize into the U.S. economy. They've got the Mu chip, the RFID chip that can play in the whole supply chain piece. The notepads in the healthcare arena are going to be a big piece in the future. So we're really trying to understand those technologies and figure out how we can build them into our solutions. We're not an IBM. We don't have any linkages as far as having to sell their technologies, but we think that there's a lot of business synergy there.
And some of the challenges are dealing with them as a parent?
The challenges is clearly understanding the Japanese culture and how they work. I've never worked in a Japanese-owned organization before. We're 70% owned by Hitachi. The rest is employee-owned. But I'm participating in our strategic planning, and it's been very helpful for me to kind of understand what's important and not important and how you communicate, and I think that's just a learning curve we need to get up.
Yeah. You'd mentioned biotech and healthcare. Are the life sciences a key industry for Hitachi Consulting?
Yeah, we're really incubating that for Hitachi Consulting up here in the Northwest. I mean, clearly that's the future, I think, for the Pacific Northwest, and we think that's going to be an important practice for us. We're also in consumer products, telco, discrete manufacturing. We have a lot of key software, obviously, big industry for us.
Yeah. Do you also focus on specific solutions?
We have a pretty broad range of solutions for Hitachi Consulting. I think if you looked at a standard consulting organization, we probably mirror them pretty well. But again, I think we try to customize those more to our clients' needs.
How would you describe your management style?
Gosh, from an old school, I'm probably a little bit of a manager by walking about kind of person. I like to be I'm never comfortable being too far away from the work, so I try to spend a lot of time with my people when they're on a project and understand the project and be able to be that person that can talk to the executive and let them know the challenges and that without my managers having to necessarily get in that mix. So from a project basis, that's kind of my style. I think from a running the practice style, everyone would tell you I'm a very strong consensus, participatory type of person. I mean, my leadership all sits together and we talk about issues and we work together and we jointly come up with plans that we execute forward.
Tell us about the You Done Good wall.
I actually stole that idea from Sunny Kobe Cook, so I can't completely take it. But I went to a presentation she gave. I thought she was a very interesting woman. We have a You Done Good wall. We get so many positive pieces of information back from mostly our clients, sometimes from other consultants, from other practices, that will just say, Ted was on this project and just did a phenomenal job, went above and beyond the call of duty, those types of things. So we have a whole wall of You Done Goods that we print them and put them out and make sure that people get recognized for them.
Which of your skills do you think have been most important in your success?
I think problem solving is probably one of my most important skills, whether that's at a client site and helping them understand a business problem they have and kind of thinking through it, or we have a problem in running the practice and how are we going to solve it and how do we move ahead. I'm a people person. I like to talk with people. I like to know what people are up to, and I care. So I think that's an important attribute.
Where are you weak, and how do you negate those characteristics?
I'm always late. Everyone will tell you that. Trying to get better at that. I think that the consensus, sometimes I probably need to cut that off sooner and be more authoritative around some of the things that we do. Sometimes I think any strength taken to extreme can be a weakness, and I think that that's probably the case in mine. I took a class one time that was really helpful to me. It was as a partner of Andersen, you're able to take a kind of career development class, and you do all the Myers-Briggs and all those exercises. But one of them, it looks at kind of what your different attributes are that define your personality. And the one that I thought was very funny was that I'm eccentric, and I think I probably am eccentric. And they said that's one of those things that if it goes, too crazy, it could be a weakness, but can be a strength. I think most of the time it's a strength for me. I mean, there are times where I'm probably a little bit too goofy for people and not quite sure what to do with me.
How important has networking been to your career?
I think it's been really important. As we've talked through, I've always been, you get little nuggets from people that suddenly take you down a path. And in our industry, so much of the relationships come that way. You start to work with one person, they introduce you to someone else, and that's the way the world works,
Talk about the difference between flapping and soaring.
I saw a presentation by a photographer from National Geographic that I thought was one of the most inspirational which it was intended to be, but it was one of the better ones I'd ever seen. And he used photography to talk about how to look at things a different way. So one of my favorites was he showed this large field of dandelions, and he said, well, it's a large field of dandelions. And then he shot a dandelion from the ground up into the sun, and it was phenomenal. I mean, the picture was like, wow, that's beautiful. And he talked about you have to look at things a different way. Well, he also talked about sitting up on this cliff in Hawaii, and he was watching the birds, and he was talking about how you could watch them catch the trail winds, or is that what you call those, thermal winds, and just glide and go forever, without one little flap. And then you would see the ones that were trying to get up there and catch the wind and just flapping like crazy, to get there. And he made a comment about how when you're soaring and when you're flapping, and it really struck home with me. I kind of thought back and I thought, wow. I mean, think of those times when you're soaring and you feel good, you're in your zone, people are impressed by what you can do, and those times you just struggle so hard to just try to do okay, and what it helped me, I don't know, that whole thought made me think about, why don't I play to my strengths more and not always, realize what you're not good at and fill those gaps in with other people who are good at it. And I think that, if I was to give people advice, that's one of the things I would say, is I think too often we think that you're only working if it feels hard, if it hurts. And I don't think that's true. I think you can be soaring and be working very well.
Aside from the sexual harassment situation, what other challenges have you had being a female executive?
There have been clearly times when I come in as a consultant and I'm not heard. That's changing, I think. Yeah. 10 years ago, particularly, I've always looked young, female, there's times when you're clearly not taken very seriously. And I had situations where I would have to bring in one of my peers to be the front person, and I would still run the whole project in the back. But, in a good old boys network, I just didn't play. And then there's other times where you play very well. They actually like that contrast, so.
When your daughter Ivy was a year old, you and your husband felt that something had to give. What decision did you make at that point?
Yeah, my husband was working at Microsoft. He is a musician, so he was playing shows weekends and evenings. And I was working that LDEC project where, I've stood at the cliff and I've jumped. And my daughter was not quite one, and we were starting to, just get at each other, and we were both tired and stressed, and we sat back and said, okay, something's got to give, because our marriage means too much, and there's friction in it now, and we don't want that. And we looked at all options. I looked at dropping back my hours. We looked at everything, and in the end, we decided that Jeff would quit his day job because he really didn't care about it very much. It was nice to have the extra money, but it didn't mean anything to him. His music is his passion. So he quit and became a full-time home dad, which I think took him a little while to get accustomed to, but he's doing very well at it.
Instead of having it all, you've sort of talked about being a woman in business and making it work. How have you done that, and how do you create your own village?
I think you do have to make it work. I think one of the things I've tried to do is, as much as possible, bring family into work. So I mentioned, meetings that I've taken my children to. I've come to events at the university with my daughter. I mean, I do things where I don't think kids have to necessarily be in a bubble over there and can't be part of our community. My village, though, is probably the most important thing. I mean, that includes my mother, who does a number of things for me that I couldn't even name. My husband, who takes care of my children, who feeds me and goes to the grocery store and does all those things that I don't have time to do. My people at work, my admin, who leaves me a message every night and says, remember, you need to be here or there tomorrow because, you don't want to forget where you're supposed to be. We have a nanny who works part-time that comes in and helps. I mean, so you put all that together. You've got friends and a community, and I guess I view it as I don't spend, as much time with my daughter as a stay-home mother does. I can't. But I think that she benefits from all these other people, because there's all these other wonderful people that are in her life, and I think that's as important.
It's been a tough job market and employment market for the past couple of years. What are some of the qualities that you think students need to have in order to succeed in the IT field going forward the next 2 to 3 years?
Oh, well, I think that's a loaded question, but I think with all the things that are happening with this offshore, and with the amount of technical resources that are going to be available as the world really becomes kind of one market, I think if you're coming out of school now, you've got to be able to go beyond the technology. And I think that's what differentiates our practice a little bit, is we're not just, we always joke heads on a stick. We don't just do the technology. We look at business solutions, we solve problems, we're a much more holistic view. And I think that as a student, you need to have that. You need to understand not just the technology, but the processes and the business structure and management and politics and all those things that go into making a business run. And that's how you succeed, I think, these days.
Yeah. I'd like to close with a composite quote from several of the people that Tamra works with. In addition to being an enthusiastic fireball, Tamra is truly a partner with her clients, coworkers, and staff. She leads through example and the persuasiveness of her ideas, not through threats or intimidation. She connects the brain and the heart together. In tough decisions, she thinks about the impact on the individuals as well as the business, and makes decisions based on all factors affecting the short and long term. She brings a sense of stability to the office. We are confident that she can successfully bring us through tough times. She already has. Through her actions, she has shown me to lead by example, to think big and bold, and to take some risks professionally and personally. I view Tamra as one of my most valuable role models.
Information Technology Leaders is sponsored by Hitachi Consulting, Hitachi's global business and IT consulting company. Hitachi Consulting offers practical solutions to generate demand, ensure supply, and help you manage your enterprise effectively. More information is available at www.hitachiconsulting.com.